Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of the Consultant Masterclass. I'm back with Adam Morgan and Jack Johnson to talk you through consultant requirements during RIBA Stages 4 and 5. Enjoy. Right then lads, so stage 4, what consultants do we need and what do they do and how do we work with them?
You gonna crack the same joke or all of them?
Don't be bringing me off-air jokes on air.
I'm robbing them.
I can't even remember it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So basically, stage 4 is arguably the most important part. The client would probably argue you don't need any consultants, but you need them all at this stage. This is the business end of the project where we do most of our work, isn't it, Adam? Stage 4.
It's the most labour intensive, isn't it? Was that a hand over to me then?
We've been doing it back and forth, weren't we?
You know what's worth mentioning before actually we go any further on that is we actually split stage 4 in 2 as well, don't we? So you know
we should probably open with that. Yeah.
So it is a mighty stage as you just started off by saying. Then it's technical design. It's getting everything ready for tender, making sure the plans work with building regs, and there's a lot to get through, isn't there? And as you say, you do need all the consultants. So you want to start just by saying why we split stage 4 into sort of a stage 4A and stage 4B?
Because 4A typically it mainly applies to like D&B procurement. 4A is basically you're still with the client. It hasn't been novated to a contractor at that stage. So we split it because what we were finding is no one wanted to own that chunk. Yeah. So we were doing all the technical work and the client would say, well, you'll get paid when it goes to the contractor upon novation.
They almost try to say the contractor will pay you.
And the contractor doesn't want to pay it because it's not his stage. So it was a bit of a grey area. So basically we split it to try and define it a bit more clearly. We're not the only people who split it.
Strong, do we?
Yeah.
We're discussing with Magnus. When you go on their website and it's got process, they split it as well. And as Jack said there, the D&B is obviously, well not obviously to everyone, design and build. And that's where the contractor takes the main liability, I suppose, isn't it? That the idea is that it's designed and then they build it and they're responsible for any design evolution in during site discoveries and what have you. And it became popular because clients could almost wash their hands of the responsibility in a way, and it's full ownership there. Whereas on a traditional contract, the client still got that responsibility to kind of, alongside the architect, manage the build completely throughout the project. So I can't remember if we've ever even done a traditional contract, have we? So it makes sense to us as a business. But even if you did translate it to traditional, there is still, for stage 4, there is still the need for a pricing stage and a need for the conclusion of stage 4 is ready for a start on site. And as far as I'm concerned, that's construction drawings, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's a bit misleading, isn't it? Because you don't do a lot at construction. In theory, well, the way we work, at the scale we're at, the work is done by the time you get to stage 5. Stage 5 is like, send your windows out, they send you a CAD block back and you're just double checking everything that works. But you've already should have done it in quite a bit of detail.
Did you get CAD blocks back, yeah? I normally just get like graph paper markups with windows.
Not always, but
it depends on who you go on to.
So for example, on the project me and Steer on at the moment, we're in theory at stage 5, but all the work's done. But what's happened is the balcony drawings have come back from the balcony manufacturer. Mm-hmm. And basically we don't know how the windows interface with the balconies. So although we've detailed it and it's probably enough to build, we just need to go to that extra level of detail because we need to know how the sill, a specific sill, will go over the balcony. Because at the moment, they've sent us a generic CAD block and there's a gap between the window sill, gap, balcony, and we need the sill to bridge that gap. And it's just like it's more tweaks to the details as opposed to like detailing the thing at that stage.
At stage 5.
Yeah.
So, but stage 4 then.
Well, I was going to say we're not on 5 yet.
Yeah. So well explained. Save that good stuff later.
Cut that out and move that.
But no, so stage 4A then, you said there, there's a pricing stage first in stage 4, and then once that's gone out and been tendered and stuff, then you would then work with the contractor, if it's D&B, as we said, to then finalise that design
Or
almost.
I'm sorry to think, but if it's traditional, a contractor is still appointed.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, as long as they're a friendly enough contractor, you're still working with them. It's just traditional contracts gives the architect a bit more say.
Power, if you like, yeah.
But generally speaking, though, pricing's done and they're appointed, yeah.
So at 4A then, at pricing, who are the key consultants?
Let's just take it back a step. So 4A, there's a level of assumptions you have to make because you don't know the contractor. So you could like specify a wall and they don't want to build it that way. But what you're doing is you're specifying that is an item that needs to be priced. And then how you do it is sort of 4B. So at that stage, it depends on the scale of the job. The level of project we're sort of at, the key thing is you need to get the planning conditions discharged, and that is normally in the form of M&E. Structure isn't really normally a planning condition, but you need, it's the biggest priced item, and it probably has the most coordination bearing on the whole job. So you want a structural engineer, M&E, and P. The M&E normally takes care, if they're good, they will normally take care of like your energy calculations as well, won't they? Like your SAP and stuff.
If they're good, if they're a certain size. So I say the point is consultants, isn't it? But in an ideal world, where we left stage 3 was the RIBA have recently renamed it as spatial coordination. And the correct way to do it, I think that's, a lot of our teaching is based on our experience, but I think today we can come with an idea of what the textbook should be, actually. And a textbook should be those consultants, the structural civil, the MEP engineer, quantity surveyor should have had maybe a little involvement, a bit of viability might have been done, mightn't it, for the planning application and stuff like that. Fire engineer, I don't know why I needed to read that one out. So, fire engineer. But then when you're talking stage 4, transport consultant can drop away, heritage can drop away, right to light should have been dealt with. Acoustician stays on.
Yeah.
Energy consultants, as Jack said there, stays on. And the idea is that if you've done the spatial coordination, if I just use fire as an example, we've got a scheme in the Baltic for a housing association, and they were very keen on making sure we got it spot on for planning, which was an absolute breath of fresh air. And we've had a full fire gateways aside and all that sort of stuff, but we've had a full fire strategy done. So we know exactly where, every lobby should be, every escape route and all that sort of stuff. Fully checked. It's been CFD analysed, which is like, the test of where smoke's going to escape to and all that sort of stuff. So when you go into stage 4 with all those consultants already have done those appraisals, if you like, the whole process is just so much better because what they're doing is they're not coming into it blind. They're just elevating the level of detail from spatial to, real detail then. So from what might just be maybe dotted line work, maybe a structural grid or whatever, it becomes actual column sizes, beam depths,
connections
and all that sort of stuff. So the right way to do it is to get that team on at stage 3 because then it just flows into 4 nicely. If you haven't got that luxury,
you redo it all.
Then and you run the risk of a fresh plan application, or at very least what's called a section 73, which is the variation of a condition, and the condition is condition 2 in this country, and the condition 2 lists the drawings. So you're going back in to revise those drawings.
And that is a full plan and application.
Essentially, it is.
You think it doesn't sound like it is, but it gets assessed in the same criteria. So you want to avoid that at all costs. You want the changes to fall under like non-material. So you can do it as a non-material amendment then. And the definition of it is tricky. Yeah. That it isn't clearly defined.
There isn't when you go on council's website, it says there isn't a clear definition. We saw a council's website that owned that and said there isn't a definition, and it's a little bit of a judgment call. But
you sort of get a feel to know what it is, don't you? So if like you're moving a window position like over a little bit, you'd probably say that's non-material. But if you're like deleting, so the problem we're having on one of the jobs is we didn't do what Adam's just said, which you
Like a
luckily
structural
got. No,
appraisal.
like your job where you had all the coordination
Oh,
and
yeah,
consultants.
yeah.
So we didn't do that. So now what's happened is the substation grew in size. We've went back in for a Section 73. It's been in for months. And now what's happened is for a multitude of reasons, which I won't bore everyone with, we now need 2 substations. So the result of that is it's eating into parking, and your parking is subject to the overall planning consent. You get planning subject to having a certain amount of parking. So getting rid of parking is material, even though thinking like the material of a building, it wouldn't be. It's material in that.
To the scheme.
To the scheme,
It
yeah.
basically means a decent change. doesn't it?
I was struggling to define it.
Yeah, because it's a material in this case is not like a texture, is
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
To use a CGI term.
Yeah.
It is it
It's
material
like
as in
sort
like,
of incidental to the
that's it. Yeah,
parent application, isn't
yeah.
it?
Yeah.
And then that's where like you because we were saying you can drop your transport consultants off, but if you need to go back in for Section 73s,
Yeah.
you can't.
They need to be
because they need to feed back
retained.
in.
Yeah, and this is where maybe we get a few clients to listen to this one, because this is where it's so important, because and we say, how many times we say in the office that a lot of clients, and this isn't just ones we work with, this is, you hear these stories, just through our circuit, if you like, our network, that they think they're saving money by stripping back consultants, but you always pay for it later down the line, and you pay for it twice in delays, and then the fees you'd paid on time anyway.
And especially now with the borrowing facilities available, the interest rates are ridiculous. So
Time is literally money now, yeah.
It's unsustainable to do it.
There's a thing in the industry, I think, especially for those developers who just want to get planning permission on land and then sell it using the planning permission to get an uplift.
Yeah.
Because their heads aren't at where the person who's going to actually build its head will be at. So they're like, if you're trying to point out these things and say, well, you need this consultant on, you need that consultant on, they all need to feed in, otherwise you're going to have to pay further down the line. Well, they don't care about paying further down the line, because they're like, well, I'm going to flog this site with the permission, and then we get a load of headaches when the new developer comes in to buy the site with the planning permission, and they come to our office and they go, right, this should be ready to build.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, actually,
it's
no, you're going to have to do a Section 73, which is basically a new planning app. You need to get all these consultants on, because we never had the advice in the first place. And you're off on the wrong foot almost with those new clients all the time, because you're basically telling them what they don't want to hear, and that is it's going to cost you.
But we've
load of
also
money.
been criticised in the past where we've got a planning permission and then it's changed hands, and another architect has criticised our work, and we've had to say, well, our hands were tied behind our back because we didn't have any consultants.
Yeah.
So you can make assumptions, but then you'll do a massive tank room, and then the developer will say to you, well, I could get a shop in there, or a flat or something. You know what I mean? It's like, so it's so tricky. But the point I was trying to make was, if you didn't get the luxury of consultants at stage 3, you've just got to take it on the chin, haven't you? And because you can't build something architect only, so the consultants will end up having to be appointed at some point.
What I would say is experience bridges that gap a little bit. So like, if we're designing apartments, we know we want to leave room for like a water cylinder, don't we? We know that will be needed, because the majority of the big, larger apartment schemes, they don't have gas boilers, so they're heated with a water cylinder that's stored, and you need space for that. You need to know your ceiling void. So basically, the new SAP calculations, that are a lot more onerous on how you can comply with them. So skipping through it all, what it means in layman terms is the ductwork is bigger. So the ductwork's bigger, you have to drop the ceiling more, so the building needs to go up. So if you like do a void and a floor to floor, that doesn't suffice. You're basically going to have to raise the height of the entire building. But because we do quite a lot of them, we sort of will just make the height and the voids.
But you're getting back into what we mentioned, I think, in the first part of this podcast, which was, I think you said at the beginning, an architect must know a little bit about all these other consultants' expertise. You need to know a little bit about the fire eggs. You need to be aware of M&E space. You need to like have all these things in mind. But it is the consultant who ultimately determines what those are.
Yeah.
But just as a competency, as you're saying there, you do need to know and factor in space for these things, don't you?
Yeah.
And you get better at that the more you're experienced.
Yeah, spot on that. Yeah, like risers and things. I never used to put any risers in, and then knowing that they needed to be there. Don't get me wrong, but I just leave it for the MEP consultant to deal with it. Whereas now, as you say, you build. Well, I always build a bit of fat in, basically. Always build a bit of room into the scheme, even at appraisal stage, to just allow for that. But if I may, just to directly just deal with this stage, actually, the way I approach stage 4. Because we've had a little moan about when they're appointed and stuff, right? But they're on, right? They're in, because again, if we just go down the
ideal
textbook,
world.
Yeah, so we go down a textbook route, right? They're on stage 3. You had all your initial appraisals done. Personally, how I approach it, 100% right. If it was drawn in CAD or whatever else at stage 3, for me, it goes into Revit. We haven't even mentioned that yet. So I go into Revit. Sometimes I do my planning applications with a bit of CAD and a bit of SketchUp, to be perfectly honest. But for me, I make no apologies or whatever for moving into Revit and insisting really that at least the structural model is sent to me in Revit.
Yeah.
So my starting point on stage 4 is I say to everyone, I need 4 weeks to build a Revit model. And we actually bill for that separately now, don't we? We charge now for Revit modeling specifically because it's that labor intensive. And I normally ask for 4 weeks grace. And on the sports centre I'm working on at the minute, everyone was brilliant. You know, like honestly, it's actually touch wood. It's been a great job so far. And I said to everyone, don't want to hear from you for 4 weeks. Let me get my head into it. And as I'm building, because we've picked this up from another architect, as I'm building the Revit model, my understanding of the job is just flowing. And I also then started to build the site. I brought the topo in and lots of stuff.
How much consultant input had there been on that job, just out of interest, for when you
full team for planning? It was a full team for planning, so it was absolutely ideal. So everyone else had a bit of a running start actually. However, in this instance, the rest of the team had a new architect to kind of deal with, and the way design changes. So there was still a little bit of a stop-start feel to it. And the first thing I did was I just said, I just want to speak to the structural engineer at the minute, structural civil. I just want to deal with them in the first instance, because your big clangers do come from, is there a column in the door or something, or a window? And he sent me the structural frame, and there was a few clashes and, a little bit of headroom issues and stuff. I always drop the combined model into a CGI program, a Twinmotion and Enscape or what have you, because I do my own little walkthrough. It's such a good way of just getting that initial impression of, where things are landing in real time. So then I sent back loads of comments. I'll crack a document open in InDesign, and I'll just use a few markups, maybe scan them in, and then just make a mini report, engineer, get that dealt with. I then have the coordinated structural and architectural models. I then go to MEP and say, where all my ducts coming out? Do we need to cut holes in steel work? All that sort of stuff. And
well, you should never want to cut holes in steel work, should you? Really?
Depends how deep the beam is, though. Unless you want to duck under.
But that's it. They're two key things that need to interface with each other: steel and M&E, because the steel and the ductwork are things you don't really see, but they're probably the most important thing at this stage to get right.
And this is why BIM now, when we scream about it in our office all the time, is so good, because being able to work it together in the one model is just so powerful compared to having to do it in CAD, isn't it? Because we've worked with both sides, so we've had jobs where the structural engineer doesn't work in Revit.
I've worked with structural engineers that still draw by hand.
Yeah.
And I'm in Revit. It's like, whoa.
Yeah. And how do you translate that? It makes the job so much more difficult.
You've had to, in your time, just so you could coordinate, you've had to model steelwork in SketchUp, didn't you?
Yeah.
To just get a sense of it, because the engineer was that behind with BIM and all that sort of stuff. But for me, when you load that structural modelling and it lands in the right place, so you get your wheel coordinates spot on, you get that from a topographic survey, you can then match the coordinates of that survey in Revit. It's literally a button. Steve showed me that the other week. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's literally, you can share the coordinates of that survey. So everything you start drawing is in the right wheel coordinates, even if it's not strictly in the right coordinates in the sort of model space of Revit. You've coordinated that space, so it's just unbelievable. So then the structural engineer is then obviously working through those same world coordinates. So the center of their steel is, you know, as I say, it's in line with your. I'm getting dead excited over something dead nerdy there, but so when it lands in, it's just so good. And then then you go to your MEP, and then as Jack touched on there, the MEP engineer cannot always conclude their stuff in the absence of an energy assessor assessor, I think's the right word. And it's either a SAP calculation or an SBEM calculation. Normally, depending on use class, but you said you can use an SBEM for resi, can't you? But generally speaking, SAP for resi, SBEM for commercial. And they're dictating things like air changes that impact the ventilation of a building and all that sort of stuff. So that does impact ductwork, and that's sort of what Jack was touching on. And there's a new overheating regulations and all that. So those two, they do go hand in hand.
That's why a lot of MEP have now brought that in-house, isn't
yes,
it? Like what
yes,
you said
because
before.
it must be so handy for them to just have it.
Might as well
it's too disjointed otherwise, so
Yeah.
it just like prolongs the process
Yeah.
if you have to go to a third party.
Exactly. And then for me, right, and I'm sort of at this stage, and I want on the sports centre where those, the big three, if you like, the architect, the structural civil, and the MEP, I breathe easy once those three are coordinated, really. And then for 4A, I go to a scale of no greater really than 1 to 20 normally in my sectional sort of. So I start to just show build-ups, wall types, colour
comments. These just comments,
coders,
yeah, like
for pricing with the contractor, and they will then give you the comments because things might be overpriced, or there might even be a bit of room in the budget. And the contractor on this one has actually been pretty honest in saying that, well, we can upgrade that if you know in lieu of maybe keeping this sensible or what have you. So those are the main consultants in terms of getting the thing up and running and it all sorted. But we mentioned before about an acoustician. There isn't much of a requirement on the job I'm on in with sports. It just hasn't got that need. But on like residential stuff, it's massive, isn't it? They affect junction details and everything.
So
yeah.
Basically, the acoustician's key on the one I'm on because it's I think it's use class C2, which is like hotel, but it's in effect apartments, and they're on a really lively street in Liverpool, and the acoustician done the survey, and he basically could someone saying, if you want to clap your hands, stand up. and it was twice.
Why wouldn't you want to hear that?
It was twice the decibel level of what we needed to be, and we haven't quite solved it at the moment. So as initial solution to me, what we discussed was we need to line a few of the windows internally because it's got loads of windows. I was like, the client's not going to go for that. They're not going to want the windows lining internally. It's
as in blocking up essentially,
like with a plasterboard. So
right.
I then went back to him and said, well, can we secondary glaze them? And he said, I've run the calcs on it and I don't think it will do it. So where we're at the moment is for this particular elevation, because the other elevations aren't as onerous. We're thinking we're going to put timber shutters because the regulation is more strict at nighttime when you're sleeping. You basically need it to be a certain level. It's like 43 dB at night when you're asleep. So if you shut your shutters, he's saying the density and mass of the timber should achieve that as a byproduct.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's, I think personally quite an underrated role, the acoustician. They're not the first consultant that leaps to mind, but how could Jack have figured all that out?
Yeah,
he's not going to site and taking a mic, is he, and testing all that.
As well, we've created a light well to get light into, because it's a really deep plan to get light into the centre, and there's a big bar next to it, and the plant from that bar on the roof is blowing up the acoustic survey. So he's like saying, I don't know how we're going to get that bit to pass. So he said, what are your opening sizes? And I said, well, I haven't set them at this bit yet for that reason. So I said, you tell me what you need the opening sizes to be to apply with it, and I'll see if we're the sort of sensible in order to get light in and stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a level of information where I hold back and let them feed in a little bit.
Yeah, well, I do like that approach with consultants as well. And I always try and, if there's an architectural solution to something, so a nice simple one is if there is a steelwork clash, with a door, can the door be moved rather than the steel?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's how I try to run my projects because it is a lot easier, really.
Yeah.
The steel frame wants to be as regular a span as possible. So if you start moving columns in a regular span, it'll have to be supported somewhere else and braced and all that sort of stuff. So I do try and solve it with the architectural side of it. And that's kind of what Jack's getting at there. He's left things in abeyance until he gets that information in, and it's a much more efficient way of doing it.
There's always a solution, and on the job me and Steer on in Crosby, the engineer had proposed a load of bracing, and it was literally blocking every emergency exit coming out the building, and we were like, it's literally braced in every point of the building, we can't have it. So, but he was like, I can't get the frame to work unless it's there. So the solution is, that frame in this instance is the bracing will be temporary. We'll build the blockwork, tie the steel into the blockwork, and take the bracing away and put the door in.
Right.
And then
that's a good solution.
That will do it, but it takes a bit of back and forth. You don't just get there. Well, and with that in the first, well, you'd like to think they would, but
it never does. No. But this is an age-old argument, isn't it? It's a difficult thing when you're working with a consultant, because both businesses at the end of the day are businesses, and you're trying to work to a common goal, but equally you've got overheads as a business to pay, and you can't, on every single job you've got in the office, keep redesigning at the request of the other consultants. So there are times where you need to push back on the consultants and say, no, this is for you to change for you to solve. And there are times where you have to take a step back, like what you said before, where, okay, I'll be the one to relook at this and redraw it, because it could be another week's work, and that's another week that one of your other projects is then not getting attention for and stuff. So, it being about consultants, this podcast, that is like a really important part of it, of learning through experience when to push back and what areas to push back, or when to find a solution when both of you. So that situation sounded like no one wanted to budge. They wanted to keep the brace, and you didn't. You couldn't move the emergency
and sometimes
exit.
it's like,
so then there was a solution.
We're going to be
met in the
stuck
middle.
here for like 2 weeks unless we just think of something quick.
Yeah.
So,
but this is where quality of consultants comes in as well, where that takes time. I think I mentioned in part one of this that if people want to reach out and ask for a bit of advice from us, we'd be happy to give it, just based on our own experience. But there are engineers that I've worked with that are very forward thinking, very can do. Even project managers. Again, I was going to say, because I've mentioned the big three, I wanted to move into acoustician, but there's a few others I do want to touch on, and just with project managers coming to mind. Real good project managers are worth the weight in gold, in terms of they can almost mediate those discussions between consultants.
Yeah.
They can kind of say, no, I think this does fall on the civil engineer, for example. Levels, we always have that debate in the office about levels, don't we? And we always say, well, the levels are dictated by the drainage strategy, really. So that should be concluded and owned by the civil engineer. But we've worked with engineers that say, well, no, you need to tell me what your initial level is and what are my falls and things like that, because you're the one who needs to keep an eye on part M, which is the gradient of those falls, you know what I mean? So that's where you have that debate. So that's where, over the years, we have shortlisted our preferred consultants, haven't we? And we know that they'll give us the easiest ride possible when it comes to it. And a real good project manager who sometimes has the capacity of cost consultants as well. Unbelievable. They almost, they represent the client's interests. They keep an eye on the specification of things. They can check the cost of a project on an ongoing basis. So they can actually weigh in on certain design decisions as well, which is fantastic. And it's good when, you get a good PM who chairs the meetings, does the minutes, keeps everyone, just ticking over. Yeah. Oh, absolutely brilliant.
They are key, aren't they? They're really important one if you've got a good PM on a job. Yeah.
Sorry to think, but then the other one we mustn't forget is obviously where the fire engineer kicks in. So then there is the second gateway of the fire is at building regs, isn't it? And the fire.
Well, that's if it's a high risk building, isn't it? So the gateways only apply if the building is below a certain height.
Ah, right. Okay.
I think it's 18 meters or 7 stories. So if the building is that and it's a high rise and then they're classed as high risk, the consultants have to come in early now as a result of the Building Safety Act, or you can't pass the gateway. So for a higher risk building, gateway 1 would be upon plan and submission. Gateway 2 is basically, I think it's as you're getting into building regs, because there's a bit now on the building regs form that says if it's above this height and then you fill it all in, you need to also apply here. And building safety. But
with a good fire engineer on your side, those things are more streamlined, aren't they? So for me, and it's the thing where I wasn't fully certain there about the difference between, I know what high risk building is, but what I mean is how that relates to the second stage of the Building Safety Act. But what's good is I always make sure I surround myself with good consultants. So it's their specialism, so they're making sure that those things are happening anyway. So a fantastic one that we work with a lot is BB7. And our planning, the guy actually said to me, the consultant on that actually said to me, these are the things I need from you, Mr. Architect, in order to finish my fire statement, which is the requirement at Gateway 1. And it was like, great, yeah. No, I love that, because then it's putting you in a good mindset. Yeah. So again, that's what I'm saying about the importance of not just the right consultants in terms of the title, but it's the quality of them as well. Because real good ones, they do actually give you, I mentioned this in the last one, they give you little guardrails that keep it in check all the way through. And I have today on the Sports Centre received an updated fire strategy from the appointed fire consultant, and it's brilliant. There's a few comments in there. I've missed the lobby off, and there's a couple of other bits and bobs, and they've just double checked fire ratings of doors and things like that. And they just do they do their own plan check, before the building inspector even does theirs. And it's just absolutely fantastic.
Makes your life so much easier, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because they've highlighted everything that you might have missed. Because on jobs that big, jobs that complex, and working with all, we've listed off 10 consultants now probably at this stage. So to work with 10 of them, there are just things, we're all human, that sometimes do slip. But the job of these consultants is to go, hang on, remember that, remember this, here's a plan, here's what we need, here's what's missing. And then it just makes your life so much easier. You can breathe a bit easier, as you say, when they're good and when they're there giving you them reminders.
The difference now as well is, like, you have to comply with building regs, but the overriding bit of legislation is it BS 9991, the fire. And basically that is a bit more complex than building regs, and it can solve a lot of problems that you can't pass through building regs, but equally it can point out a lot as well.
Yeah.
But most fire consultants will work to BS 9991.
Yeah.
And if you're complying with that, you normally are complying with building regs anyway. And I think the new Building Safety Act has to be to BS 9991 as well.
Yeah. I think one of the obvious questions that presents itself from saying, like, work with good consultants, people might be like, well, how do I know the good, or how do I make sure I'm working with good consultants? How am I in control of that? And I think, we mentioned in another podcast about the power of networking and stuff.
That's it.
And the only way I think to do it is to spend time with them in a way, like go and see them, have a coffee with them, meet them, and just get an understanding of what they're like as a person, and you'll get some basic knowledge on if they're good enough through those conversations.
You can almost tell someone's competence, can't you, with the way they carry themselves, and
then additionally,
like
if you strike up a friendship, or it doesn't have to be a friendship, just a relationship, a nice working relationship where you understand each other. Once you've got that grounding, it's much easier to ask people for stuff. So again, taking it back to the conversation we had earlier about when you're pointing at each other, who does this? Which one of us does this? Who does this fall on? Well, again, if you've been networking with them and you've been keeping in touch with them, seeing them regularly, those conversations are so easy. Like, we work with Dice from Nottingham. Our relationship with them is so strong that when we have those conversations, it's just dead easy to talk to Wayne, one of the directors, isn't it? And say, can you pick this up, or does it need to be on us? And because we've got like a friendly relationship with them, it just works, doesn't it?
Yeah. Your relationships with people are the most important thing. You will get nowhere if you're out to do everyone and they're out to do you in return. It just doesn't work. It's not productive.
Yeah.
So you need to just go in with you need to become quite friendly with them.
Yeah.
Even if you don't get on all the time, there needs to be a level of respect at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd personally say if you can't get on with them, sort of a bit contrary to my last point, it's difficult, and you'd struggle.
Yeah,
and that happens, and you didn't get on. You just don't work with them again. You just try and you almost, I suppose it's hard to say make sure you don't work with them again, because that isn't always your decision. But I suppose that's just you can help dictate that by being as user friendly as possible.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the person who's just come out of uni. He's just sitting down in his new practice, and it is for the first time working with other consultants. And he might be watching this thinking, well, she might be watching this thinking, well, how do we make sure they're good? Or, all the things we're talking about that you should do. It's how do we do it? And
it's not necessarily a case of making sure they're good, because they are good enough because they're accredited, aren't they? So
yeah, they should.
That's a given. The key is ask them the right questions. What do you want and know to help you at that stage? And the key is coordination, isn't it? You're the architect. Where's my frame going? Where are my ducts going? And what's me acoustic?
Both. I think the point Kane's making is, earlier in your career, you don't know to ask those right questions.
I know, but they will if they listen to us.
Well, yeah.
As a result of this podcast,
they should
fine,
know. Yeah,
don't worry about it.
If you were to follow Kane's advice, network, get on with people. Then, so let's forget good and bad in our life. You get on with people. Asking those questions are easier. And sometimes if you're asking a potential silly question, if you get on with that person well enough, they'll go, actually, what you meant to ask was, where's my man all going on? Yeah, that's what I meant. As I said, there was a guy called Phil Hirons who looked after me on a school job many years ago now. And he was actually explaining the minimum falls of how water runs off away from a building and all that sort of stuff. So I had all my levels right in terms of thresholds into the building, and me 1 in 21s for gradients. But he said, but everything else is flat, so water would stagnate in those areas. So you need to make sure that you identify a fall of about 1 in 60 away from the building, so you're being clear that it'll run off into the soft landscaped areas. And I was like, whoa, yeah. So I've since then never missed off a little 1 in 60, little fall around it. Again, though, a good civil engineer puts it on their drainage strategy as well. So, but two others, just so we don't forget. One is BREEAM. So then there's the energy assessor that does the building regulation stuff, but sometimes there's a higher tier of energy assessment, which is kind of self-inflicted, if you like. There are many different accreditations, like Passive House. And on the Sports Centre, we are going for a BREEAM. I think it's good. And the BREEAM assessor on that has since, in the last week, created me like this login to a portal. And I've just got to answer a series of questions. Some of them are dead basic. Some of them are a little bit more complicated. Usual stuff like, the energy efficiency of the fabric and things like that. There's a bit of embodied energy in there. Is it locally sourced and all that sort of stuff? So there's that. And then kind of last but not least for me with this regard is we haven't touched on principal designer or a CDM consultant. And it in our office, the way we do it is we massively respect every single profession, and we don't pretend to be any other, do we? We are the aesthetic consultants, if you like, for want of an easy phrase. So we never pretend to be an engineer. Even if we have an understanding of maybe a potential column size, we would never go there. We always trust the engineer, that engineering advice. As a result of that, we always outsource or sub-appoint a PD, CDM specialist, don't we? And they're either appointed directly as the principal designer, or generally speaking, they prefer the regulations, if you like, prefer the PD to be the most prominent designer on a project. So they normally would appoint us if you don't appoint direct, and then we go out to a specialist, and again we then make sure that we get that specialist advice, and we build that into our fees, don't we?
Yeah.
And so then we make sure we get that advice and the help with gateways, the Building Safety Act. All that's changing quite fast, so we make sure again that we build in those guardrails, and it's a completely separate appointment.
There's been a change in RIBA regulations just recently, haven't they, with regards to the PD? Because I've seen a lot of stuff from other practice owners on LinkedIn and stuff. And basically now there is a register that you need to sign up to with RIBA if you are an architect that wants to do PD. And they basically slap a RIBA badge of honour on your practice to say, these are qualified. You have to pass almost like a little test with RIBA to say that you know how to do it. And they then rubber stamp it. And put out there that, you know, you can do it, because there are a lot of practices who are quite perturbed. So there are practices who don't do it like us, and they have got the skills to do PD in-house, and so they love to do it because you can charge an extra fee for it.
Fee for it, yeah.
So they love to do it. And yeah, just recently I've seen a few of them on LinkedIn basically complaining about those RIBA changes, because it takes away those expertise with them if they don't pay to be a member of that register. It's a paid thing.
Yeah.
So they now have to pay for a license to say that they can be PD. So just an interesting one in terms of like, yeah, that's the way we do it and it works for us. And then we haven't got to do all that RIBA stuff as well, I suppose, as a benefit. But you can, you know, your practice that you might work in, they might do it in-house. And there's just been those changes recently I think you have to pass a small test.
And in my opinion, and my opinion doesn't represent anything of Studio RBA or
personal opinion,
but in my opinion, it sits better with a specialist.
Yeah,
I think
it does.
Oh, well, we're all agreed here because that's what we do.
I've done both, so I've acted as PD on a job before, and you find you can't get anything done because you're getting stretched from pillar to post. So
you've got to manage other people's design risk assessments and build all that into the health and safety file. Managing all that it pulls you away from your design responsibilities.
You're not going to draw your
You're
toilets.
not going to draw your toilets and your ceilings, are you? Thingy. So my advice to people, and this isn't the textbook way or the only way, but my advice would be to just stay in your lane and just allow these other specialisms. That's why CDM companies exist, because there is a need for that, and they have the specialism, and not just the specialism, but the focus. I think we use the word focus in our office a lot, don't we? Again, if you've got a good team around you, and again, you program your time properly, you can focus on all these, you know, on the key tasks at hand. Whereas if you're trying to be an engineer or you're trying to be principal designer and all this sort of stuff, you get distracted.
I think the clouded the definition of it and made it a bit confused. When it was a CDM coordinator and it sort of sat independent, people knew they just needed it as like you would need another consultant. But when they tried to bring the onus more onto the architect, there was reasons why, because in a way it does, we are the best person to design out the risk at the early stage, but it was a totally different profession that they then tried to absorb into us. And these CDM coordinators exist for a reason. So
the naming was terrible as well, because we get appointed as a lead designer, as an architect. And we've had debates with clients where they say, why have you given me a fee for principal design? I thought you were already that. And we say, no, that's health and safety.
It's something totally different.
Yeah.
The naming of it is so confused.
Yeah. So you should have kept it as CDM.
Everyone still calls it
so.
CDM coordinator.
Yeah.
You know, anyone who's of an age.
Yeah. But again, it keeps it, I think it does keep it clear. But yeah, anyway, the main message here is that we have covered the consultants for stage 4, I believe. And the key message is that you have those specialisms and just try and make sure that everyone's staying in the lane, and the architect is just the puppet master to make sure that everyone's kind of feeding that information in, and then you've got to be that checker and just checking through the information you're receiving isn't clashing with the overall architectural elements.
Yeah. Does the difficulty in working with consultants get easier or harder, or is it the same throughout through the stages? So
through the stages?
Yeah.
I think it's like experience.
So like some consultants, you know, from 3 to 4, does it get easier? And you know, does some get harder, or is it pretty much of a muchness? It's all technically sort of
depends
the same.
What the issue is really, because in a utopian world, you shouldn't really have much of a need at stage 5 because it should all be done. So if there is a need for it, it's a bit more of a disaster. Like if you're finding you're having to move steel that's already in or designed at stage 5, that would be a difficult situation. So it just depends on the issue really, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I would say though, to answer your question directly, I would say that stage 4 is probably the hardest bit though in terms of the coordination, because at 3 it's zonal, so you've still got a little bit of license almost, you know what I mean? At 3 you can say, well, you know, that's kind of where it's all going to be roughly.
Your PI is starting to come on the line in stage 4.
No, well, exactly, yeah. and there's just no hiding. You can't hide in zones in 4. It's specifics. It's literally, that is the size of the beam, that is the size of the duct. So I would say it gets progressively more difficult up to 4. And then as Jack said, that's why really 4 is the meatiest one, because in 5, the thing should be on site and you're dealing with queries as they arise rather than real meaty design elements.
I had a bit of a one today. So the mechanical engineer was basically asking me for a load of stuff. And I'm saying, I can't tell you like ceiling heights because I don't know what your duct sizes are. So I don't know where I'm putting the ceiling. Yeah. So there's a back and forth, and he was like saying, and rightly so, I need, before I can start speccing duct sizes, I need to know the SAP calculations, your envelope build-ups and stuff. And I said, can you just give me a worst case scenario what the duct sizes are going to be?
So, you just I
cut through all the white noise and just said, I just need to know the duct sizes, over-spec them, and we can start bringing them in once.
When we get all the info.
And that's experience though, because then they go 200 mil.
Yeah, they give you something.
He said 170, and here's a link to what I'm thinking. And I was like,
because everyone's covering themselves on.
Yeah, because you're scared at stage 4 about your PI.
What was going on in this situation is he was like, they're not ready to do that bit resource-wise. So they're trying to kick it into the long grass.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to put loads of people on it at the minute. And I was like, I just need a schematic to know the thickness and where they're going. And you just, I just say, no, just give me this high level, give me it. And
I won't hold you to it.
Yeah.
Give me the worst case.
Give me the worst case.
And I can always make it better.
And I'll put my ceiling, my insulation. I know where it's going. And then if you tell me the SAPs are making them smaller, the ceiling's only going to go up then, isn't it? So it's not a disaster.
Yeah.
So stage 5 then, you just neatly sort of rolled into it by saying, if you do stage 4 well and everything's right, and then your contractor gets appointed. I suppose one bit we have flashed over is once you get to stage 4B, then though, as we call it, the contractor's appointed and you're beginning that novation process. So basically then the contractor starts to engage with you and says, we've won the tender. We're going to then appoint you. So your appointment changes from the client that you had all up to stage 4A. You are then employed by contractor once you've been through that novation process, which includes signing appointment documents, which will point to collateral warranty documents to ensure your work further down the line. And you need to see all your insurances.
We're not doing a part 3 one now. That's the next one.
No. So, but you might need a little solicitor to as a consultant.
He is. Yeah, because he does it all. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my time to shine.
Yeah, that's it. But solicitors are a funny one though, as you say, as a consultant, yeah.
Yeah, well, because
they give us advice, don't they, on appointment documentation?
Yeah, so like, you wouldn't call them a consultant.
Here's a mad one, sorry to butt in. So, you're probably back to stage 4 a little bit. We will jump back to stage 5. Name and numbering. So, if you're doing apartments, you need to be getting onto the council to get each apartment a postal code, because you can't apply for the electric utilities without it. So there's an important chronology to it.
And the architect applies for those?
No, they try and make it, but on this job I'm on, the client in fairness has just said, here's all the postal addresses.
Is there a consultant that does that then, or is the owner just
I've always done it. But there's just there's a liaison officer in the council who's normally pretty chilled.
I have done it, and yeah, is it George Kwok in Liverpool Council? He's the one who...
if it's still,
does it.
So, you get his details, so because you've been through the planning application process, are these normally like ready
at the
for
bottom
the
of
app
the form, and it says, just note, you need to apply for addresses. You can't apply for quite a lot of the stage 4B stuff. It's 4A, you're just designing it. But once you get to 4B and 5, you can't apply for like electric meters and stuff without an address. They will not put them in for you.
Well, the MEP consultant does advise a little bit there because it's utilities.
Yeah.
So incoming utilities is a responsibility of theirs, and they do normally say, oh, I was going to say like Scottish Power, say for example, they're asking for the address.
Yeah.
Say, and then you go,
No, but as someone who doesn't know this, who's listening, they will just expect you or the client to have already done that. So if you say, oh, we haven't got an address, that takes a bit of time. So you want to be doing that like straight away.
Yeah. Yes. Stage 4A, you need to be sorted.
So we normally in our deliverables, we will put like name and numbering application, and whoever does it's irrelevant, but it needs doing.
To be done,
yeah. Okay. And then sorry, just because 5, there isn't much to be said for 5 actually with consultants, so we should be all right. You mentioned a contractor, you novated, you talk about the appointment documents. I was just, to get myself moving with what I wanted to say, I was just picturing how I run my projects. And then for 4B, it's when you get into the contractor design stuff, isn't it? So I've actually been asked.
We can't get into 5 here, can we? You keep taking the conversation back to 4.
No, but I don't think there's not much to be said for 5. It's the consultant is the builder. You get these contractor design elements, and that could be the staircase, for example, a specialist, a staircase, and there's a few other bits and bobs. And for me personally, just so because this is very, very important, and I think we both do this quite well, really, is that once the thing's priced and it's on budget, I then go out to all the manufacturers and the suppliers that I've specified. So Kingspan is an easy one. I will then go to a Kingspan and say, I want what's called a project pack. So this is 4B.
Yeah.
This is so 4A is the very, very detailed design. 4B is now like real, like it's like, right, well, what is the exact product? What is the exact jointing and everything?
So, in terms of them being called a consultant, would you call them more a supplier now?
Yes, so in our folders,
consultants to suppliers.
And that's probably
and the contractors,
that's
suppliers.
Probably the definition. It goes from consultant, which is a bit more theory-based, to real-world supplier. And as Adam said, the prime example of it is partition types. So I always spec Cineat because they're quite easy to ring. They answer the phone straight away. So there'll be a back and forth with Cineat. I've been onto them for like the last 2 weeks. There'll be a few tricky partitions where you're like, I need this to be this height, but it needs to be this fire rating. They will tell you that, and then you'll just draw that as a wall type. Then once you get to 4B, you'll send all your drawings off to them, and they will in effect supply you with all the junction details, which then in theory should apply a logic that is based on their testing methods, where it complies with fire regulations. So, a fire will adhere to the criteria you've set to them, and the acoustics, there'll be like flanking details with the junction. So if you've got like a floor where it meets like a wall or a partition, that needs to be detailed in a certain way. You as architect don't make that up. That exists in their system.
Yeah.
That's tested.
We're not trying to make up new details.
But
we're working to what's out there.
A lot of people reinvent the wheel, but in some instances, they won't have a detail. And then, so in that instance, you'll go, okay, let me work with the acoustician. You may need to run that by the fire engineer, and there'll be a bit of a circle you have to go in, and then
if you can't find a supplier to supply the right ceiling type,
it's not the right ceiling type. It's like how that ceiling type will meet like a beam, or that's probably a bad example, but there's certain instances
you are
where
overcomplicating it slightly. Basically, every one of these suppliers has a technical division, and all I was going to just say on mine was, I'll in the next couple of weeks, I'll be going to a Kingspan, Cineat, whoever else, and saying to them, here's the scheme now, drawn up to stage 4, and I want a project pack from you, per supplier, and you double check that supply chain with the contractor. They mightn't use Cineat, they might use British Gypsum, just as an easy example. So you go to all those, and what they do in there with their technical team is they send you the junction details, as Jack said, but they also productize everything, don't they? Like categorize everything. So an actual dry line company can just go, there it is. Like I can just order all that and fit it all exactly like that. So as long as you've given them the right level of information, they then give you all these individual project packs. And you know what? It trims down your own time, because you could detail all that yourself. I have done it in the past.
I used to.
Naively, where I used to
pointless.
just do all the junctions myself. And you say they all exist, but not just exist. There's a technical team that exists that could draw it for you, because they're getting the contract themselves as a seller of those materials, so they're happy to do the technical design. So it goes from consultant to supplier in line with the contractor's supply chain, and you just double check whether what you specified is what they envisage to be the supplier or not. You agree who that is. You make sure it matches the right performance from acoustic, fire, thermal.
Yeah.
And you then engage with all those. And this is where that confidence on the phone is important, because you're ringing around the houses then, as Jack's been saying there. So you're ringing them all, you're saying, I want a project pack for this, send it across, blah, blah, blah. And even everything down to, I use a company called Height Safe, who do an access and maintenance strategy, how to clean the windows, how to clean the facades, the gutters, everything. And you get all these amazing packs. And we have a suppliers folder that we then submit as the conclusion of our stage 4B, alongside the evolution of our drawings, because they do evolve a little bit.
So I was just going to say, so you said before stage 4A, you don't really go any more zoomed in than 1 to 20.
Yes.
Because you're just showing the idea of the thing.
You do when it's listed, so that's why I'm
there's a
overcomplicating it.
Yeah,
There's a nuance.
The difference with me and Adam, taking today, for example, I'm on a listed building.
So you need to be at 1 to
the
5.
stuff I can't solve with Cineat.
Yeah.
So I'm having to try and resolve it myself.
But then, so list of buildings and some of the nuanced things aside in the industry, 4A, 1 to 20, 4B is 1 to 5.
1 to 5,
and you're, while you're doing these 1 to 5s and producing them, you're just basically taking as much of the information from these project packs as you can and just putting them on our draw sheets.
Well, not always translating it. Sometimes you get a belter of a project pack that you just submit.
And you don't even need to put them on our sheet.
I wouldn't translate it because it clouds the liability.
But sometimes a project pack only gives you typical details. This is from stage 4A to B, you go from typical to actual as well. So the only time I do translate a project pack into my own drawings is when it doesn't deal with a specific junction. I will go back to them and ask first, don't get me wrong, but sometimes maybe it's 2 products and they say, well, we can't give you a junction because it's 2 products. We only deal with that product or what have you. So I will, with my 1 to 20 sections, I'll then do call outs on those 1 to 20s that speak to a 1 to 5 view in Revit. And then I will then just add that level of detail.
Yeah.
And the product pack isn't always nailed first go. The job me and Steer on, that's on like revision 4. So you will go back to them and say, that isn't what I was thinking for that. And they will change it for you.
Well, give us an example of that. Why? Because I never have done that. I normally just get the project pack and go, well, they're the expert. Don't get me wrong, I check it for performance reasons. I always check it for the high level stuff and coordination. But give us, why
was just a few things that have
something?
changed, we needed a different stud depth, and they recommended like a double stud acoustic wall. And after discussing it with them, they were like, "Oh no, there's like a new product where it's a single stud and it's broke in the middle."
So it was thinner. So they specified something that was too chunky.
And then they then submitted that in revision 2 of the project pack, which accounted for the acoustic.
Do you get problems with the contractor at this stage? So say you send the project pack off and they don't like certain suppliers, or it's too much money, it goes over budget if you have to use that system and stuff. And then if that comes back to you, then are you just ringing a different supplier, or have you got to find solutions in the detail?
That should be dealt with during the tender process though.
Okay.
So the conclusion of 4A is an appointed contractor who should be on budget, because that's why they've been appointed.
Yeah.
So in theory, you shouldn't have the to-ing and fro-ing. The issue would be, say you specified NAUF petitions, whatever, and they've got.
We would argue how you say that.
Yeah, well, we said that we don't say knife, so we'll go for NAUF, and
silent K.
But they might have a contractual relationship that has a discount maybe for economies of scale and what have you with a British Gypsum. I'm just using petitions because it's the easiest one. And they might just say to you, oh, you've specified everything Cineat now. We use British Gypsum systems. And you'd be amazed the difference. You'd think, well, how much difference is there with a 70mm stud on a bit of plaster either side? But there is a difference in the system. So you that's the annoying bit, where they'll come to you and say, right, we're on budget, but it's all British Gypsum. And you go, oh, I've specified everything
And the
Cineat.
problem we're having as well is on one of the jobs we're on, the contractor does not want to use 15mm plasterboard. He's saying it's too heavy, it's a nightmare to cut. We need to go back and see if we can get it to 12.5mm. And in the end, we have.
Oh, how did you find the saving?
So it weren't necessarily a saving, it was for acoustics, and the acoustician in the end went, although it's not tested, I think it will comply. So what we're going to do in this instance is we're going to build one typical apartment, and he's going to test that one apartment.
Wow.
And if it works, he's then going to test every other one.
That's good.
Whereas the contractor was saying, do you know how much more heavier 15 mil plasterboard is than 12.5, and how hard it is to cut? So the man hours there, it's worth the messing about.
Yeah.
See, a lot goes on behind the scenes at my desk, Ad.
Well, you're more enough about it, so. I just want to get that across, that's that transition into 4B, and that's why we define it. Because how can you call all that one stage? It's bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the stuff we spoke about.
No, and it's interesting that, like, as you say, that with this being like a consultant's masterclass, it's starting to feel like a delivery masterclass, this second episode, actually, which is quite good.
Yeah.
But A and B, A is still consultants. B sounds like it's much more suppliers, and that's a key change that people need to know
suppliers,
about.
Contractors, subcontractors.
A is in the absence of a main contractor.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's pretty much
exactly
the difference of it.
Yeah,
and you get a contractor, and they feed in.
One final question on 4B: once the contractor has won the work, and then you're on a D&B contract, so you're employed by them.
They strip all the detail out.
They can change the whole thing because they're then in charge, aren't they? So that is an instance where you could be in 4B, done a load of work 4A, and they just go, no, this all costs too much money. I want to make more savings than I originally
That's the negative
thought.
with design and build contracts. So it's a lot more difficult to control quality. So their mission, MO or whatever, is just, I'll give you a building for this price. Mm-hmm. So they're not really concerned about like what window types and that, unless you issue them with a set of employers' requirements.
Yeah.
And at the tender stage, you would basically say, no, you've got to use this brick, and you've got to use these windows, as part of them getting the contract, and then they can't deviate from it then.
Well, sometimes at planning, it can be a condition that certain materials are used as well, can't they? So
but at
too
planning,
much.
all they will say is what type of window, and they will pretty much accept anything still, won't they?
It's not a bad shout, though. There are some sensitive buildings where they are stricter than others, but it's not as strict as employers' requirements. And again, a good project manager, quantity surveyor, so PMQS, you'll hear that a lot. A good PMQS builds all that into the employee's requirements as well, to make sure that the quality isn't completely diluted. Because, as Jack said there, contract value could be 3 million, and they could go to the architect and say, I want to strip $500,000 out of it, so I can make that on me bottom line.
It's basically, you need to look after the interest of the building as a piece of architecture and the client. So they don't want a building back that's like, in their head had like lovely aluminium windows, and it comes back with UPVC, and they haven't paid for it. Yeah. And according to the contractor, he's done what he said in line with the contract. So you there's a bit of protection, and they would normally have like, as Adam said, a quantity surveyor who's like their agent, employer's agent, and they just basically make sure everything's in line with their interest.
Yeah.
Contract admin, we haven't mentioned that. So the QS she said about the employer's agent. The QS also administers the contract, and that does neatly bring us to stage 5, actually. So when they start on site, the contractor will.
The contract doesn't need administering if it's D&B, does it? Is it only traditional?
There's still a contract to manage, though, isn't there? In terms
There's
of
a contract, but it's not like you in traditional they'll do the work. The QS will say, right, you've done the work, issue them with a certificate to say they've done it.
But the contractor's got to submit the thing, haven't they?
I think,
So
because we're not normally involved, are we? So we don't.
No. But I still think, in my experience, that still sort of happens in terms of the contractor still has a cash flow forecast, and they've still got to evidence the work that they've done. They still submit something. It's just not as formal, I don't think. Regardless of that, though, traditional or
might
design
have to do
and
a
build.
bit of homework on that.
It was a while ago. We done our part 3, wasn't it? But nonetheless, the PMQS does handle the contract. Let's not worry too much about the administration stuff, but they deal with the contract. And it is nice when there are those variations in specification and things. It's just nice having that good project manager who can just, there's a decision to be made, isn't there? Is the client happy to actually sacrifice a bit of quality to make the saving? Can that saving be shared amongst the client and the contractor and stuff like that? And I'd say the only consultant actually that springs to mind at stage 5 that hasn't already been mentioned, I don't know whether it's a consultant or what have you, but the setting out engineer. That's a tricky one to get right, isn't it?
They think a lot of people think they're done. So the person who drew the topo or the building survey, if it's like a blank site, they then need to come get the plan back off you and plot where the building's going. You don't do that.
Yeah. That has to be someone who's, as you say, you've done the topo.
Well,
or a surveyor.
But on my setting out drawings, I do give a coordinate of the corners of the building. And then, as Jack said there, then a setting out engineer pegs that on site. And that's kind of the starting point.
Yeah.
And a good setting out engineer or maybe even a groundwork company, they also double check the levels that you've proposed to make sure that there's nothing silly, like that'll need like a massive retaining wall or whatever.
Yeah.
So they do a little level check and then they peg the site out to just make sure that it fits on the site and you know what I mean? You know, just all that sort of stuff. And there are some times when we've made the odd mistake. And maybe a level was a bit off or a coordinate was a bit off. And again, a good setting out engineer just gives you the ring and says, look, we're a bit out here. Just double check, the information you've given us. Sometimes they receive it in CAD, don't they, as well? So you don't even need to label the coordinates. As long as the CAD model is in world coordinates, they just take it and plot it on site. It's absolutely fantastic. You can't really control that. A contractor normally appoints the actual ground worker one. That's contractor appointed, or as you say, the topo surveyor goes back and does a double check.
Is there any other consultant? So the one that's springing to mind from our conversation about stage 4 is CDM PD. Are there any? So you said you would hope that you wouldn't have to revisit any of the consultant works, otherwise it's been a mistake. But are there any that you do need to keep touching base with during stage 5?
Everyone needs to be on the ball. Absolutely, everyone needs to be on the ball. As the thing's coming out the ground, the discoveries are made. Maybe something's discovered in the ground that means that maybe a foundation can't go there. So the engineer needs to adapt to that, and that might impact everything. It might affect how the MEP layout. It might affect the acoustics and what have you, and that might have an effect on health and safety risks.
Depends where you are as well. So like. We've had a site and like we thought, oh great, we're there, and it was in Chester and they found Roman remains and it just literally
World Heritage Site.
I was about to swear. It messes the whole thing up.
Like, well said.
No, so because it's interesting, isn't it? That, like, because what I was going to say earlier when you said you don't really deal with consultants.
Basically,
at stage 5,
if you start digging your footings and you see a lovely marble mosaic, you're in a world of trouble.
No, but sorry. What I ment was not that you don't need to deal with them. What I mean is there's no new consultants that need mentioning. That's all I meant.
Yeah.
So everyone needs to be.
Everyone's still on the
everyone
project.
Needs to be at the end of the phone.
Everyone charges a RIBA Stage 5 fee, don't they? So
absolutely.
The question I was going to say
and that fee is
what's your fee
expensive.
For? But your Stage 5 fee is usually so high in comparison to every other stage because it carries the most risk. Because you're at that stage going, I've done all this work, it should be fine. Like, we're building the thing, like, great, I've done a lot of work there. But if you discover something at that stage, that's the hard yards. Yeah. So that's why
I said earlier,
so high.
You don't want to be revisiting consultants at this stage, really. Yeah. So a prime example is we've just had on one of the jobs we're looking at, we've just had a fire consultant fee. Relatively okay at stage 4, and then at stage 5, it's 1,400 quid a day.
Yeah.
So like, my client is saying, well, I can't work to that. That's open. Like, how many days? Like, and it's scary once you get into that. So
in stage 5, it's site progress meetings as well.
Yeah.
So the whole team normally does not the whole team, but key figures from the team. They will meet on a site cabin, and you'll go through site progress and things, and just even like junction details. Sometimes in reality it mightn't quite work as you envisaged, and little things that get made up on site and what have you. On the sports centre I'm doing, there's an existing fence that acts as basically a party wall between a good 20 neighbours that all needs repairing and things, and that might just present issues as you go and what have you. So again, as you say, that's why there's a good chunk of fee in there, because it's kind of monitoring the project as it's being built, and dealing with changes when it's on site is roughly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my main point, just to be absolutely clear, my main point is there's no new consultants really. Everyone who's been involved at stage 4 should carry through to 5. And I just wanted to touch on that initial thing when the job's breaking ground and it's being set out on site, it can just get a little bit fiddly.
Yeah.
You know, just getting that spot on and getting the engineers to agree that that is the slab level, that is the threshold level and all that sort of stuff, and they're the key coordinates. That's the only new figure that kind of comes into. You get a few calls.
Each consultant will already be in play, and they will build in a bit of site exposure in stage 5. And the reason being is, like, if the MEP designs it in a certain way, they have to warranty the works.
Yeah.
So it's in their interest to keep coming out just to make sure it's getting done as their drawings, because they can't warranty it if it's not.
Yeah.
But sometimes the MEP consultant only does a performance design, and in the contract for the builder, they have to appoint an M&E or MEP subcontractor who takes that responsibility on.
Yeah.
It's sometimes they do drop off from a job, actually.
So the subcontractor is the person who's building
the thing,
but they take
on an element of design first. They do a bit of 4B, if you like.
Yeah.
And under the contractor, and they're appointed by the contractor directly, but they are an installer first with a design capability.
Yeah.
And then they kind of do their own monitoring as well on site.
Yeah.
And even like steel fabricator, they have a little bit of that, don't they? They sometimes step in and critique the engineer's frame, because they're the fabricators, they're the ones who are building the things day in, day out.
Yeah.
So they might just critique the engineer a little bit and say, oh, we can do it a bit more efficient here. Or, there was a job where they were saying about why are we stepping in and out for the sake of 3 or 4 ducts when the steel frame is way, trickier and way more expensive. Let's get the steel frame flush and the ductwork can step in and out, things like that.
Yeah.
So that's that consultant supplier little transition.
You get that with specialist items as well, like pools. Like if you're designing a house with a swimming pool in it, we just spatially plan it, and then it's on the specialist to come in who builds. Specialist pool builder will then take that liability and do the final design.
Yeah, all the environments and all that
stage
sort of
4
stuff.
stuff. Yeah.
Pools are another animal, though.
Yeah.
There's so much that goes into them. Like, we discovered them. We they calculate, like, does the pool have a cover? Is the pool left covered or not? That has a big bearing on the atmosphere, because if it's got a cover, it's not all evaporating the water, and you have to keep it at a certain internal environment. Let's not go near pools.
No. But what Kenny was trying to demonstrate with that, though, was there are specialist items. You need to be very careful in identifying that and ensuring that it's being dealt with properly. So yeah. There's tons of them. To be fair, you could even I've been asked that question. What are the contractor design elements on this project? What would you say they are? And I was almost tempted to say everything, because even the cladding, I would like to see an element of setting out from Kingspan. What's the ideal setting out? Have you got an ideal corner width? You know what I mean? Because I could set out from one side at a metre setting out, and at the other end I might only end up with 200 mil, and they might say, oh, 200 mil is a fiddly cut or what have you. So sometimes I get a bit of that as well. So you can actually tease a lot of that, out of all the suppliers. So yeah, I've been weighing up my response to that, actually, because it's somewhere between everything and half of it. Yeah. You know what I mean? So just need to figure that out.
Making it up as he goes.
Yeah. We all are. Everyone is.
I think that's probably it, because 6 and 7, they don't really need touching on.
That's handover and lessons learned and things like that.
Yeah. It's we've gone over the onerous ones, really.
Yeah.
Any more that you can think of, or do you want to list your top 5 consultants? No.
We've just done
the ones that can kill people. They're always the most important.
I said the other day, fire's the most important, because you can't die of noise.
Structure, in case it falls over.
Yeah.
Ventilation,
because you can't breathe. Yeah. No, so that's it. Well, to be fair, I said the big 3 is architect, structural and civil. That's one. I'm counting that as one. And an MEP. But you know what fire is now basically in that, because of the all the stuff that's come out of the Building Safety Act, and rightly so, it's brought all that design forward. Totally agree with it. And actually, the impact that the fire strategy has on, even just on layout, is huge. So 100%. I need to start rewording. That's a bit of an old-fashioned saying that. It needs to be big four. So there they are. They're the big four.
Yeah.
And I would say no one's more important than the other. The architect is just the orchestrator of them all.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a nice place to leave it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We hope this masterclass has been useful for you. If you have any questions about this episode, please leave us a comment or an email on the link below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.